Hello, everybody. Boom. All right. Live as live can be. Mike Mills with Verity Mortgage here today. Welcome to the 49th episode of the Texas Real Estate and Finance Podcast. So today we are, let's see, it's not necessarily real estate based. This is something that I'm kind of a dork about, that I was really interested in and, have a fair amount of knowledge on, but I wanted to bring an expert in to kind of help share a little bit of, fill some gaps for me on stuff that I don't quite understand as well. And it definitely relates to finance, because I do think this is where in the next 10 to 15 or 20 years, you're going to see a lot of financial applications kind of lean in this direction, if not fully move over because of the cost and effectiveness of it. But we're going to get into all that. So today, my guest is Amy Anderes Damron, right? Did I say it right this time?
You did say it right.
Now, welcome, Amy. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having me, Mike.
Now, Amy is a member relations director. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Member relations director for the Texas Blockchain Council, which is something that I recently learned about within the last 6 to 8 months, which I was very excited that such a thing existed, by the way, because learning as much as I have over the last couple of years about blockchain and Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and all the stuff involved with that, I was super excited to see that there was an organization in Texas that was actually trying to lead the way on making Texas kind of one of the innovators in this space, right? And so I was super excited to find out that this existed, and then add another layer to it, which Amy and I discussed when she came in today. Amy and I went to high school together.
We go way back.
Yes. So it was crazy. I was online just kind of doing what I do sometimes, looking up stuff, trying to figure out, how I could expand my knowledge on blockchain and crypto. And I come across the Texas Blockchain Council, and I'm looking at their podcast that they do every day, and lo and behold, there's Amy. What are the odds, right?
It is a small world.
Yes.
And the crypto space, the Bitcoin space, everybody is it. Once you get in, it's like everybody.
Yes.
It's a small club right now.
Yes.
We're hoping it becomes bigger.
That's right. And that's part of what you're doing, right?
Absolutely.
So let's start first with tell me how, because we talked a little bit about how you kind of got here before you got here, but before you got on the podcast. So you were a teacher and a coach, and you were an athlete in high school, because I remember that, and you coached all the way through, your early 20s, I would assume, right into your 30s.
That's correct.
So how does a teacher / coach go from that into becoming let's call yourself an influencer in the blockchain and crypto space? How does that even happen?
I appreciate it. Well, that's very complimentary. Thank you. I don't know that I would get that far with it, but you know what? I follow this Instagram page. It's called Teacher Misery. Okay. And she coaches teachers on how to get out of teaching, and how all of those skills are so transferable in other areas.
Yes.
And I am a recovering educator, took some time off to be home with my two sons. And one of the friends that...
Wait, by the way, back up.
Yes.
So you said that term earlier, and I love it. What is it again?
Recovering educator.
Perfect. Love it. I got plenty of teacher friends out there that will love that one.
I mean,
you're going to have to get yourself a t-shirt on that one. You got to trademark that statement.
I like that. I did hook up with the teacher misery person.
That's right.
That's right. On that.
Yep.
But so many skills are transferable.
Yeah.
And when I was ready to re-enter the workforce after taking some time off to be home with my boys, one of our park friends that we ran around with, she had kids similar age. She said, "Hey, my husband Lee is super swamped right now. Business is booming. He needs an assistant. Would you come on and help take some work off his plate?" And I said, "Sure."
Yeah.
So I started as executive executive assistant.
Right.
I don't know. I guess that term is dated now. I don't know.
Yeah. You were helping out. You were helping all kinds of things, because I'm sure that title encompasses everything, right?
It certainly did.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was scheduling, I was helping with emails, but what really hooked me was the events. I got to welcome people in, get them their name tag, get them,
So kind of did PR to some extent for it as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in so talking to the members, I just learned about the space, and here I am.
And you got real excited about learning about crypto and blockchain and all of those things that come around with it, right?
Exactly. Because it was foreign language to me. I was like, what even is this?
Well, that's the thing, is it's foreign language to everybody. And, again, we talked about this when you got here, but, for me personally, when right before the pandemic hit in 2020 is when, for whatever, and I don't even remember the exact circumstances to why I got somewhat interested in it. I think maybe a friend had brought it up or something, but I'd started seeing more and more stuff about Bitcoin. And so I was like, well, let me see what this is. And what I did actually was I had like, I think I took like $100 or a couple $100 and I opened a Coinbase account and I just bought some Bitcoin because I was like, let me just see what it's all about. Right. Because I figured the best way to learn about it was to kind of put a little skin in the game. So that way, I mean, it was, like I said, it was like $100. It wasn't much, but that made me more interested. So now I was watching YouTube videos, stuff was coming up on my Twitter feed. Like, it was just a regular inundation of information regarding Bitcoin specifically. And then of course that bleeds into blockchain and bleeds into Web3 and NFTs and all these other things that are involved with the blockchain. And so as I became more and more fascinated by the topic, well then, at that time, because right before the pandemic hit, when everybody's at home and we all got a bunch of time on our hands, and then you got the Robinhood app that became really popular during that point. And so people could start investing small amounts of money. And so you start to see the crypto exchanges just explode because everybody had time and to some extent money. And so, so that's when I really started learning a ton about it. And, of course, investing more and more and more and more. And once you kind of fall into the rabbit hole, and you understand what the technology is and what kind of applications it could have for the future, then you become in a place where you're like, I really got to figure out how all this stuff works. Because if I can get ahead of the curve on this stuff and really understand where it's going and what kind of applications the technology can be used for, then it creates all sorts of opportunities. Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. You hear people taking the orange pill, they get orange pilled, and then you fall down the rabbit hole. But I liked how you laid it out, because first you're curious about the currency, and then you're curious about the technology, and then you're curious about the applications, and then it just keeps going further down.
Yes.
And I haven't reached the bottom yet.
No, well, I mean, nobody has.
It's like Alice,
Well, you were doing, because you do a podcast. How often do y'all do those? Is there any regular schedule?
Weekly. We're going through a bit of a reboot.
Okay.
I've had 2 co-hosts and, different circumstances, life.
Yes.
But I'm hoping I could maybe work. A relaunch is in the works.
Gotcha.
It's not official yet.
Okay.
So stay tuned on that.
Well, I've watched a couple of those to try to get an idea of, what you do and kind of your, how you're involved with everything that you do for Texas blockchain. And I was watching one the other day and I was sitting there going, I have no idea what she's talking about, because even as much as I kind of, pride myself on having a pretty good understanding of how all this stuff works, I was still lost for what was going on, because there's so many layers to it. And I don't think people understand how much depth there is in the crypto and blockchain area.
Exactly.
Right.
And as you know, with the podcast, I mean, what lean do you take? Do you want to be educating people about it? Do you want to be updating people about it?
Yeah.
So we never really found our niche,
Mm-hmm.
because I would pitch it to my friends and family and be like, hey, watch this. And that feedback was the same. Like, I have no idea what you're talking about.
Don't know
like I tried to watch it, but I was so lost. It was like you were speaking Greek.
Yes.
So,
well, you have to decide if you're going to be, the information that you're going to provide, is it for a very specific segment of the market, meaning only the people that understand that space and understand what's going on there, or are you trying to educate the general population, right? So that's kind of a bleed into the Blockchain Council. So tell me a little bit about what you guys do, kind of what your mission is in the state of Texas, and what activities y'all get involved in on a regular basis.
Okay, thank you. So Texas Blockchain Council is an industry association.
Okay.
So 501c6.
Okay.
And we want Texas to be the place where Bitcoin mining, the currency, the transaction, blockchain, all of the things that are encompassed in that rabbit hole are protected.
Right.
We want Texas to be a hub of innovation. And so our mission is to create the framework and then flesh out the legislation. We have a lobbyist that then pushes said legislation through. We work to educate electeds.
Okay.
We work to educate
electeds.
The
Is
electeds.
that the like the senators and
that's what we call it.
State senators. Yeah. I didn't know there was a term for that. The electeds. That's
the
funny.
Electeds.
It's like the infecteds. Close to it, right?
Exactly. Exactly.
Right.
But you only get like 10 or 15 minutes with these people.
Yeah.
If you do get into their office, and what do you say? How do you break it down in 10 to 15 minutes?
It's very hard.
That's a lot of time if you're,
Yeah.
you're not getting just moments with these people. So TBC helps you connect with your legislator. They help you with the scripting, even with we had to battle a bill 1751. It was going to strip away incentives for Bitcoin miners.
Okay.
So we had to go on the defensive. We held a rally in Austin on the Capitol grounds.
Okay.
We set up this website where you could put in your zip code and find out exactly who your legislator was. Here's the email. Just boom, put your address in and it'll send it off.
Yeah.
And so
make it easy for people. So plug and play.
Precisely.
Right.
We hold networking events. We hold educational events. We're trying to really drive some research coming out of some higher institutions, higher ed institutions. So there's a lot that we do, but it all just boils down to making people more aware of this technology and
how
embracing
it all works.
it. Yes.
Now, you guys do a summit. I want to say every year, but I don't really know. How many years have y'all done the summit at this point?
We've done it for we're coming up on our third annual summit.
Okay. And I've seen before, I think you had Ted Cruz was there. Did I see Marco Rubio? No, I don't think so.
So Andrew Yang was there.
Yes.
That was huge. Who else? The summit, we're moving it out of Austin. So the first 2 years we held it in Austin.
Okay.
And if you know Austin is a hub of all things cryptocurrency, metaverse, Web3. Every other weekend there's a summit conference going on.
It's kind of a mini Silicon Valley for Texas, essentially.
Exactly.
Right.
So we kind of made a risky move to relocate to Fort Worth.
Okay.
And Fort Worth, you're hopefully wondering why Fort Worth.
Well, I'm not actually, because there was an article, I think it was in Fortune magazine like yesterday, that was talking about Fort Worth being like the next Austin, essentially, because of the amount of growth that's happening over there.
Yes, they want to be. And Fort Worth is the only city in the U.S., the first and only city in the U.S. to be mining Bitcoin.
Oh, wow. The city is?
The city.
Really?
Texas.
So how does that work? Like, how does a city mine Bitcoin? Is that just like, is that funded? I mean, I think it's great, but is it funded by like tax dollars, or how does that work?
No. So in City Hall, the Texas Blockchain Council donated the equipment. They plugged it in, and it's been running for about a year now. In fact, Carlo Capua, he's assistant to the mayor there in Fort Worth. He came and gave a presentation at TCU a couple of weeks ago, and he shared with us that the mining machine has earned a little over $1,000.
Wow. Okay. So they just have one miner.
Yes.
Okay.
Because they started with two S9s, which were the older form of the ASIC miners. They didn't work so well. So they had to come in and switch out the S9s for one S19. But it wasn't the money generated. It wasn't the Bitcoin that was generated. They got so many media impressions. Mayor Maddie Parker got to go on all these news broadcasts and tout this. And it was hugely impactful to them. Yeah.
Just to be one of the first ones that's doing it by itself, whether you've got one mining machine or 500, it doesn't really matter. Just the fact that there's a municipality in the country, it's kind of like, was it the country, Bolivia? No. What was the country in South America that actually made Bitcoin like its reserve currency within the country? You remember?
Yes. Is that Brazil or Argentina?
Argentina, I think is what it was. We'll probably get that wrong, but either way, but they've got a ton of publicity over that because they were basically buying up all kinds of Bitcoin to kind of keep their currency in balance, essentially. And so that in and of itself drove a ton of, tourism and all kinds of things in that direction. So whenever you have a city in the United States that's saying, hey, look, we want to be the first ones that actually start getting out there and using this technology to benefit the city, that's nothing but good publicity for anybody, regardless of how much you're mining.
Precisely.
Right.
Yes, exactly. And the next move is, would they be able to keep it on their balance sheet? That's what we're pushing towards.
Right.
As of now, no, they convert it back into, as we say in the space, fiat paper money.
Okay.
It's down the road.
It's always funny whenever, we'll get into Bitcoin in a second. Let's start simple first. All right. So, the title of the entity that you represent is Texas Blockchain Council. Okay. It's not Texas Bitcoin Council. Okay. Now there's probably a very good reason for that. Because when people think of cryptocurrencies, they think of cryptocurrencies and they think of Bitcoin and they think of maybe Ethereum or whatever, but they don't think of blockchain, right? And what I don't think people understand is that the technology that drives all of this, whether it be NFTs, Web3, Bitcoin, Ethereum, any cryptocurrency out there, it's all driven by blockchain. Okay. So if I was 7 years old and you were trying to explain blockchain to me, how would you describe it?
I would say, so now you're going to make me dig into the teacher.
That's right. You're
I'm gonna
a
teach
former teacher. You got to be able to explain this to me.
So it is I can't use the word distributed because that would go over a 7-year-old's head. It's an
Okay.
open book.
Okay.
You could see the origin of something. You could see the transaction or the exchange of something. You could follow it through multiple transactions.
Right.
And it's laid out in front. Nobody is controlling it. Nobody is writing it. It's doing it on its own. It's operating automatically. I think that's what I would say.
So when you said, what was the first word you used?
Open?
No. With the D. My
Distributed.
brain's distributed. Okay. So I was thinking decentralized. So I would say that decentralized and distributed are similar terms in this case, right?
I never thought of that, but yes.
Because when we talk about blockchain, the true advantage to it essentially is that it is not centralized, right? When it comes down to all, from my understanding, when it comes down to all cryptocurrencies and anything regarding blockchain in general, the biggest advantage is the decentralization of it, because everybody that's on the network has essentially a copy basically of the ledger,
Precisely.
right? And they all have to approve of transactions, or there's different methods these days between how those transactions get recorded and approved, because there's what Bitcoin is the competition one. What's that called?
Proof of work.
Proof of work. And then Ethereum moved over to proof of stake.
Yes.
Right. Okay. So we won't get that far down into those things, but that's just the basically verification of the transactions that happen. The best way I've heard it in my brain to say is it's like a ledger, right? It's an accounting ledger of transactions. Okay. But the ledger of transactions that are being recorded are public to anybody that wants to see it, right? But they're not, it doesn't say Mike Mills, sold Bitcoin to whomever, right? It says wallet number, blah, 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 blah. It's like, what are most wallets? Like 25 characters long or something like that?
Yes. Letters and numbers.
Yes.
Yes.
So, so that wallet transformed or transitioned to that wallet. Now, granted, I remember, I don't know if you remember back in the day, do you remember Silk Road?
Yes.
Okay. So Silk Road was an underground website or web server essentially that did a lot of really bad things, essentially, right? And a lot of it was transacted in Bitcoin at the time, because there was a thought that Bitcoin was anonymous, right? And would you say that Bitcoin's anonymous?
Not 100%. No. I
No.
mean, because of what you're describing, like
Right.
you could see address to address.
Correct. And if you have the powers of seeing IP addresses and things where this stuff is being transacted, then say like if you're the federal government, then you could go in and find where those wallets are being tagged to and then go after those people. So I would say that, Bitcoin is certainly, it keeps, or I should say the blockchain keeps the information transparent, but it doesn't give everybody access to know who's doing what. You just know the transactions are happening.
Precisely.
Right?
And the other important thing about the decentralized part is that there is no one individual that is in charge of recording all of this.
Correct. Right. So you're saying that everybody kind of gets a say, which makes it the word that I hear used a lot is immutable, right?
Right.
Where if someone were to try to go in and hack the system essentially, then that would be picked up very, very quickly, because everybody within the network, if it's 1,000 or 2,000, how many people are actually, do you know the number of like computers operating or miners operating on on Bitcoin specifically? Do you have any idea?
I don't know. I was thinking in the tens of thousands, but no.
Okay.
Don't hold me to
It's
that.
a lot.
Yes.
Either way. And so all of those have to basically agree and record that transaction was happening. And if something is wrong about it, because the whole idea of the blockchain is it's a chain of blocks of transactions, and they all link up to each other. So if you go back, 10 blocks or whatever, and it doesn't line up with the one that's at the top, then the network says, no.
That's right.
Right?
It operates on a consensus mechanism. So a majority of the blocks have to agree that that's the corrected, true representation of the data.
Now imagine if government spending was recorded on the blockchain, and how much transparency would be there, right?
I think a lot of people would be caught
not doing so great things.
Yeah.
I saw there was this is the conspiracy hole here a little bit, but so the government does an audit every year of every department in the federal. There's an audit department that does a transaction recording on every department in the federal government. Well, they do it like every 4 years. I think they do an audit every year, but it's a different department every year. And so the Defense Department has never passed the audit. Not one time. They've done it 20 times. They've never passed the audit. And it's by, there was the thing that happened right before 9/11 was the Donald Rumsfeld had come out and said the Defense Department had lost $2.6 trillion that they couldn't account for. And then 9/11 happens or whatever. But the idea is that the government that is such a centralized system isn't necessarily a huge fan of everything being decentralized, especially when it comes to monetary interests. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
Yes.
I would agree with that. Although they are pushing a central bank digital currency.
Yes. Well, and we're going to get into that too. Okay. So now that we kind of have an understanding of what blockchain is, right? It's a decentralized ledger that is transparent and immutable, where people cannot go in and mess around with it and make any changes to it. So, which means it's very secure, which means that if you're making transactions over the blockchain, then you can feel pretty confident that there's not going to be any, there's a different word I use, but I won't use it for this one, but there's not going to be any, anybody playing any games. Okay.
Okay.
So then let's talk about, Bitcoin specifically. Okay. Because that's what everybody understands. So can you tell everybody a little bit of a brief history of Bitcoin and how it kind of came about?
Yes, I can. I mean, I know in the halls of TBC, we suggest the read Satoshi's white paper.
Okay. Tell everybody what a white paper is.
A white paper is a description of a process, a description of an idea.
Okay.
A report, I guess, so to speak.
Yep.
And did you hear that these are like hidden in the Mac? If you have an Apple computer, you can actually it's hidden in the code of your computer. Did you ever see that?
I think I do remember seeing that, something like that somewhere. But yes, I think,
so
because everybody thinks Satoshi was Steve Jobs, right? Is that where that comes from? Yes, yeah. Okay, I'm with you.
So this the white paper is recommended reading, and then there's a book called The Bitcoin Standard.
Okay,
it was by an individual, Safdien is his last name.
Okay.
Super dry because it starts at the beginning about a history of money. But if you start at the back half, you get to learn about what Bitcoin is.
Right.
So what is Bitcoin? Gosh, it's a peer-to-peer system. It's a currency. It is right now one of the only proof of work currencies that is available.
Can you briefly say what proof of work is?
So proof of work is the computers are all verifying the blocks, as we said. This requires energy. It requires,
which is what mining is.
Precisely. So mining, the computers are solving for a number. And if they guess that number, then they get the block reward, which right now is 6.25 Bitcoin.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
We're coming up on the halving.
6.25?
6.25. Yes. Bitcoin would be the reward. If you're mining computer.
You get 6 Bitcoin for
6.25.
Really?
Huh?
Wow.
You're like, I'm in a machine.
I need to go get a mining machine. Goodness gracious. Okay. Yeah. Go ahead.
But that'll go down to 3-point change.
Yes, because of the halving, which is a whole other thing. Right.
Exactly. But nobody knows who Satoshi Nakamoto was. It could have been an individual. It could have been a group of people. They just sort of put this in motion and stepped back. And
yeah, that's the craziest thing about it is that this happened right after the financial crash in 2008 is when the white paper was written or presented or whatever. And the guy who wrote it, who nobody knows who he is, created this, distributed ledger, basically invented the blockchain. and it just started kind of building from there. And, just like anything else, it starts small with a small group of people. I think there's the famous story of the guy who bought a pizza with like 200 Bitcoin or something like that,
Yes,
and
that was on May 23rd. Actually, we just had a celebration.
Oh
of
yeah,
that
yeah,
event.
yeah. How many Bitcoin was
It
it?
was 10,000 Bitcoin.
10,000 Bitcoin. Okay, so to give you an idea, Bitcoin right now is pricing out at around, I think it's down a little bit today, but it was like 25, let's say it's $26,000 per Bitcoin. So this was 10,000 of those. So if that guy had 10,000 of those Bitcoin today, he would be worth a lot of money. But then it just kind of slowly started building and building and building. And so I was telling you earlier that, in my little circle of the world here, when I try to talk to people about this stuff, the way I always demonstrate or try to explain how Bitcoin works is like, what is it? It's just like fake. Like, how do we even know who got the money? And so I say, okay, I have a piece of paper. All right. And let's say Amy and I decide that this piece of paper, it's one piece of paper. We're going to tear it in half. She gets half and I get half. And we decide between the two of us that we're going to exchange goods with this paper, just you and me. Right. And so I want to buy your shoes because I think your shoes are amazing. So I'm going to give you half of my half a piece of paper and you're going to give me your shoes. Right. Well, this is our version of a currency. Nobody else is involved in this. This is just you and me. Right?
We agree upon it.
We agreed upon it. And then Johnny comes along and says, hey, what are you guys doing over here? And I say, well, we're what's this paper and what are you trading? I don't understand. And like, well, we're saying that the paper, he's like, well, I want to get involved in that. So you give him half of your paper and I give him half of my paper. And now we all three have this paper and we all decide that we're going to buy tacos and shoes and whatever it is with this paper that the three of us have decided to create. Right. So the security or the value in that paper is only assigned by the three of us in that particular circumstance, right?
Right.
So take that and now multiply that by thousands and thousands and hundreds of thousands of people. And that's how you get a currency, that people can have faith because they decide they want to put faith in it. I mean, the US dollar is not backed by anything other than the faith and trust of the U.S. government. Essentially, all our tanks and guns is what backs the U.S. dollar, right?
Yes.
So it's the differences are negligible in what they're actually based off of because dollars are not based off gold anymore, and Bitcoin's just it's a digital currency that people are choosing to use to transact and hold value. And it went from being worth 0.000001 to now it's worth $25,000. So there certainly there are people that want to have that value. Would you agree with that?
I would totally agree. Yes, I would. It is all about the participating parties. Like you said,
Mm-hmm.
You can opt in.
Yes.
Or you can opt out.
Correct.
If you decide come a given point, this isn't for me, I don't see the value in this, then simply.
So why do you think people opt in?
Why do people opt in? I think it starts with a curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
I think the more that they dig in and start learning, I think the more interested they get.
Yep.
And I think the more people that you meet that exchange with Bitcoin, it's almost, I don't want to say it's a contagion because that sounds bad, but
it's a little, I don't like to use the word cultish, but it kind of is that to a certain extent. I mean, it really is, if you're being honest, right? It's because you have to kind of buy into it a little bit to understand. And the growth that it's had over the last, 5 years, let's just say, obviously has been tied to the fact that it went from, I don't even know if you go back, it's 2023, you go back to 2018, maybe it was worth $8,000 per, $5,000. I don't know. I don't have the graph in front of me, but then it shoots all the way up to almost 70,000 per Bitcoin, and then comes crashing back down. But when you look at the cycles over time, that is what has happened specifically with Bitcoin. There are all these big swings up and down because it's a new technology and people don't understand it, right? And when you're putting money into something like that, that is for the masses, is something that's new and you could say it's innovative. You can say it's untested. It's certainly unregulated as it currently stands. All of that creates volatility, right?
Precisely. And the market never closes.
Right.
It's not like the S&P where, there's quitting time. It's all day, every day. It never stops. And so, if you just get a wild hair and at midnight, 2 a.m., you can hop on and you can get you some.
How much do you guys as a council, how much do y'all have to spend time like actually educating people on what it is?
I would say, honestly, our member body is a majority Bitcoin, and they're called Bitcoin maxis.
Okay.
That
I
would be a
love
person
all the terminology.
who
Yeah, yeah.
is solely Bitcoin.
Yes, they don't believe in any other cryptocurrencies. It's just Bitcoin.
Correct.
Right.
So, within this cult, if you want to call it that, there's tribalistic sort of mentalities that
Sure.
you've got the maxis, and then you get the ones that do, combination, and then
Yeah.
you have, so where was I even going with that?
Well, I think,
how much time do we have to spend educating?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Not much, because most people that come to the
They
council
already
have
know.
a baseline understanding. Yes.
Well, it's kind of like I always relate it to like the early 90s when the internet started, right? When the internet came out, there were, and we remember this because we were of that age, but anybody that's younger may not, but you had, let's say you had search engines, you had Yahoo, you had Alta Vista, you had Netscape, you had Google, you had all of these different options that you could use in ways that you could go about searching through the internet. Because the whole idea behind using the World Wide Web was there was a ton of information. I mean, obviously it took time to build up, but it was like, okay, how do I get to the information? Right. That was the always the thing. It's like, well, somebody may have what I'm looking for on a website, but if I don't know the name of the website or where to find it, then I need something to help me get to that point. And that's why the search engines become such a Goliath in that area or in on the internet, because that was the main avenue that people used to find the information they were looking for. So, anytime you have multiple, in this case, multiple search engines competing for people's eyeballs, well, somebody's going to win, right? Or someone's going to be the leader of that, which ultimately now we all know is Google. And so, so I always kind of equate the crypto space to that a little bit, as to, I think that they're different, and we'll get into that in just a second as far as what they do. Because Bitcoin really is kind of a currency, but I think Ethereum is different. I think Ethereum is more of a platform that uses their ether in their platform to conduct business. But once you kind of understand that they're all kind of competing a little bit for the same space, well, then somebody ultimately is going to win. And right now, Bitcoin, it was the first one out of the chute. It's so far been the most, what's the word I'm looking for? Like dependable, I guess, or the most secure is the word I'm looking for there.
Sure.
And because the person that created it, nobody knows who he is, and there hasn't been any shenanigans that are involved with it. It's been the one that's kind of stood the test of time. Right.
I agree with you. Yes. And I think the cryptocurrencies that came after Bitcoin have kind of shopped the characteristics of it, and, then added their own, functionalities. And
what would you say the difference is between, say, Bitcoin and like Dogecoin?
So
everybody's favorite,
a meme coin. So it was something that came up as a joke. It's proof of stake versus proof of work. There's infinite numbers, whereas with Bitcoin, there will ever only be 21 million.
Yes.
I
think that's the biggest thing, is the Bitcoin has a cap.
Right.
They're not going to be any more than 21 million. That's it. Now, what do you ever say when people say, well, how does that work? Because that means that, once it's all bought up, you can't get any more. What's your response to that?
Well, then that's the point where I talk about Satoshis and how there's 100,000. I always get this number wrong. Is it 100,000 Satoshis in a Bitcoin or 100 million?
Does it have a name now?
Yes.
It's called Satoshis?
So, yes.
I didn't even know that.
Smaller increments of Bitcoin.
Wow. Okay. So it actually it's like a penny. It's like a penny compared to $1. It's a Satoshi. Okay. All right.
Precisely.
I did not know that.
Yes. And, even after in 2140, all the Bitcoin will be mined.
Right. Okay.
2140. But even as people are exchanging it, interacting with it, there'll be exchange fees. Mm-hmm. So it'll still be generating
which is what the miners will do.
Right.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Well, so from way I understand it is, and the way I tried to explain it before is, so yes, there is a cap, 21 million of Bitcoin that'll ever be produced, but you can subdivide that 21 million, I mean, really into infinity, essentially, because you can just keep adding zeros, right? 0.00000, all the way through. So if one Bitcoin one day becomes, have you heard the highest estimate on what they think? I know it's all like, future, who knows, projections, whatever.
The highest estimate I've ever heard is $1 million.
$1 million.
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I think I heard the other day that somebody said it'd be worth one Bitcoin could be worth $10 million in like
wow.
10 or 15 years, which would be great. But you can divide that downward in as many different increments as you want to still be able to use it if you actually do use it as a currency. From what your understanding is, the difference between, we were talking about Bitcoin specifically, but when you get into other cryptocurrencies, okay. So for me, I've heard of things that are like, the term like oracles and where, so like Ethereum, from what I understand, correct me if I'm wrong, Ethereum is it's almost like a web platform to some extent because you can build applications on top of it, right? Because it's a smart contract crypto.
Correct.
Okay. And with the smart contract, when you build, so like if you and I were going to place bets, for example, right? We're going to bet on a football game. You say the Cowboys are going to win and I say the Redskins are going to win. And we put our 25 Ether into a smart contract, and then an oracle takes that information once the results are in, essentially, and then puts it result into the smart contract, and then the contract automatically gives the money to you or me depending on the result.
Right.
Is that how that works?
That's a really good way to explain it.
Well, I like to gamble, so.
And did you know most of the cryptocurrency exchanging is happening in gambling and gaming?
Oh, like really?
Video gaming, and then casinos.
That's the underground part of it, I guess, right?
Yes.
Where they're trying
although some people would say that could be the
more
doorway
secure
to mass adoption too.
Yes. Well, it always starts that way, right? I mean, it's I mean, I hate to say it, but I think one of the drivers behind the internet originally was inappropriate videos that you could find online, right? So it's not an unusual thing that the kind of the underbelly of society uses some of this technology first before, not that, I mean, look, people gamble all the time. It's not underbelly, but it certainly is, depending on where you live and depending on what state you're in, on what the legality of it is, if you're doing online betting. But I guess that's an easy way to transact and not have to worry about it. Plus, I mean, because it does get transferred the way it does with the blockchain, you feel pretty secure about it, right?
Yes, precisely.
Yeah.
Yes.
So what other cryptocurrencies that you're aware of are starting to kind of gain traction within the last like 3 or 4 years?
Ethereum, we were watching that closely because they recently transitioned out of proof of work to proof of stake. And I think that was a pretty incredible transition, and it went well. And they got out from under the environmentalist eyes. Unfortunately, you hear a lot of the narrative that Bitcoin is a energy hog and is creating a huge carbon footprint. So
because
they kind
of the
dodged
energy
that.
It sucks to do the mining.
Precisely.
Gotcha. Okay.
Precisely. Other tokens or other platforms that are on our radar, I could not tell you.
They kind of move in and out depending on. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's been so much in the last, really just in the last 12 months between all of the controversial, the FTXs of the world that have kind of gone down. It's caused a lot of issues with people having faith in just cryptocurrencies in general, right?
Right. And
how's that going for y'all?
USDT and USDC are sort of interesting because they're more of a stable coin.
Okay, so that's a good thing. Tell everybody what a stable coin is.
So a stable coin is backed by something physical.
Right.
So that could be money, gold, or fill in the blank. Even we're seeing that people are putting like real estate behind it.
Gotcha.
Right?
So it's backed by an asset of some kind.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so that sometimes is a safe place for people to dip a toe because they can see that they're, what's behind it.
It doesn't fluctuate either.
Precisely. It will fluctuate with whatever that asset that's backing it, but
like the dollar, if it's backed by dollars, it'll fluctuate that way.
Precisely.
And isn't that where it wasn't FTX? There was another one that kind of got into trouble because they were using the stable coin. What was the stable? Luna?
Oh, yes. The Terra Luna debacle.
Yes. So what happened there?
So they were commingling funds. And, I don't know the exact details of it, but they were funding the project with their own token
that they were using as the backing of it.
Precisely.
Right.
So you heard the analogy, it's a house of cards. There was nothing that was supporting it, nothing that was behind it.
Well, I think that's what scares people a lot about the space, is because it's not regulated right now. And, I think it would surprise most people to say that, everybody that operates in the blockchain, universe or whatever, you guys are y'all actually want regulation. You're not trying to keep it unregulated, right?
Precisely. In fact, one of our bills, it was the House Bill 1666. It's a proof of reserve, proof of liability. So any exchange, any cryptocurrency company that's wanting to do business in Texas will have to undergo these audits at regular intervals to make sure that there is indeed the assets backing that particular token, coin, fill in the blank there.
Yeah, I think the problem is that blockchain itself as a technology is fantastic in what it can do because of its security. The downside is you still have human beings that are involved.
Human nature.
Yes.
Its ugly head.
And people, I think they conflate the two, right? Because someone says, obviously you see the price of Bitcoin go up and down, but then you also see, the FTXs of the world, and the, Binance has gotten into trouble, and all these things, the Terra Luna debacle and all that stuff happened. And people go, wait a minute, this whole thing is just filled with, chaos. And it's like, well, yes and no. But if you relate it to something like, say, in the 20s, where you had prohibition, right? You could not sell alcohol. Okay. Well, alcohol, I mean, I don't want to equate alcohol and the blockchain, but it's just a thing, right? It doesn't do anything inherently of itself. It's a tool, right? So it's who wields the tool and who uses the tool. That's the problem.
Yes.
And so when alcohol was illegal, well, then you have gangsters, and you have, criminals of all sorts getting involved in transacting. This problem we have this today in the drug trade, is you have all these bad actors and criminals that are involved in the space because it's not regulated, or it's not managed by any federal government, so everybody can feel safe about operating there. And so when you take that and you put it into saying that all these assets, because people are doing it whether or not we want them to or not, right? I mean, it's the cat's out of the bag at this point, right?
Exactly.
So it's up to organizations like you guys are, to try to help people understand how it works, number one, but then also make sure that our regulators understand that we have to get controls and we have to get regulation in that space, because if we don't, then there's a lot of people that can suffer because they're going to get involved with it one way or another.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And we ride a fine line, because yes, we want to regulate it, but we don't want to stifle it. Right. So we want there to be guardrails. We want there to be space for everybody to operate and get their businesses and these ideas off the ground. We don't want to crush it. And,
right.
You gave the example of Coinbase earlier. I mean, they're looking to go overseas because right now the SEC has been ruling by enforcement. They just come down and smack anybody who's doing wrong. And there never seems to be a rhyme or reason for who they target and who they're going for next. And it's made the entire industry very uneasy.
Why do you think that the federal government pushes back so hard against this? Why are they coming after crypto as much as they are, and not trying to? I know there's some people that are trying to build bridges there, but as a whole, it seems like the federal government's not trying to do that.
I agree. I think it's a control thing. Mm-hmm. This challenges their control of us
because they have a central bank.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. So this is very threatening to them.
Yes. So speaking of that, why don't you tell everybody what a CBDC is?
CBDC is a central bank digital currency.
Okay.
In Texas, we are super anti-CBDC. In fact, Ted Cruz was on board with that. He took it up to DC, but it would be a coin. I don't know that it would be a stable coin necessarily, but it would be a currency that would be controlled by the government,
right?
By the central bank. And there's
why is that
some
a bad
theories
thing?
That the reason why government is trying to squelch all this cryptocurrency is so that they can swoop in, if you will, and say, well, here's a better idea. Here's what we propose.
Well, China's already, they are already testing out a central bank digital currency in China right now. They haven't had mass adoption because they're trying it out in certain markets. But from my understanding, what they're trying to do with it essentially is say, okay, all of your money is now tied to the central bank, so they can see every transaction you make. They can record and watch every single dollar that you spend, essentially. And where the real kicker comes in is they have control to basically turn it off if they don't like what you're doing. And it's kind of, anytime I talk to people about privacy stuff, when we discuss, because, dealing in banking all the time, we talk about people's privacy and documents and information and financial information. And when you joke about, Siri listening to your phone calls and, and all this, like, oh, well, I don't have anything to hide. Like, that's always like, I don't have anything to hide. And my response to that is always like, well, yes, based on who gets to say what you do is right or wrong right now, sure, you may not have anything to hide. But what happens when a person gets in control or power of that decision making on who gets to decide what's right and wrong, right?
Exactly.
And that's where the privacy things comes into such a big player. And that's why the CBDCs, in my opinion, are a terrible idea. Because if the federal government can then decide I don't say they don't get to decide what you spend your money on, but if they can decide when you're allowed to spend your money, that's a problem.
This is a big problem. And
right?
Surveillance is going to be the name of the game there.
Yes.
Because like you said, they could see every transaction. They can, halt any transaction if they don't like where you're spending. It's just a terrible idea. And with only, let's see, the day's the 25th, 4 days left of the Texas 88th session, we do have a resolution that is in the pipeline somewhere, and we're still holding out hope that it could still
to try to.
pass.
I think was it in Florida? Maybe I think DeSantis might have actually passed something that said they would not accept any CBDCs. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, he's everybody's favorite out there these days, at least in one side of the world. Okay, so we understand a little bit what blockchain is. We understand a little bit what Bitcoin is. We understand a little bit of some of the other cryptocurrencies and how they're involved. NFTs. Okay. Cool. This is always something that throws people for a loop all the time.
Yes.
So, again, how would you explain what an NFT is?
NFTs. Okay. I read this book on the airplane. An NFT is a way to prove ownership of an object. Okay. A digital object.
Okay.
And it shows the provenance, who created it, when it was created, who it was transferred to. So what we're talking about with the open ledger.
And it uses the blockchain.
It uses the blockchain.
All of this uses the blockchain.
Yes. And
CBDCs will use the blockchain.
Yes. Artists really like this because after you sell a piece of art the first time, you get you get the commission, you get your money. But then if that piece of art gets sold again or again or again, you don't get to see that money back to you. But if you were to put this on the blockchain, the NFT, you could, as the artist, receive a reward every time your piece of art is exchanged.
Yes, it's a programmed residual essentially. So when you create those NFTs, and I think it's taken off so much in the collectible space because it's just the easiest adaptation for people to understand essentially. But and you'll see a lot of artists. And when I say artists, I don't necessarily mean like painters, because obviously they've got the Bored Apes and all, Bored Ape Yacht Club and all that stuff. But even athletes are getting into it too. Where, it's like a baseball card essentially. But the difference is when the baseball card gets traded to somebody else or sold to somebody else, that athlete that created that actually gets paid every single time, which is fantastic. Right. And I've heard in the music world where they're trying to push things towards is, so if I'm the Foo Fighters, one of my favorite bands, and I create an album, right? Well, I can create an NFT of that album that is, if I want to create 300,000 copies of it or whatever the number is, well, every single time that album gets sold or traded, then I, as the artist, get a percentage of that sale every single time. Yes. And so now you get to hold that as like, again, some of it's collectible stuff, but I've even heard like concerts. We went to Lollapalooza last year, and I'd seen somewhere where they were talking about, so the pass that you get to go to Lollapalooza is actually an NFT. And the way it works is if you have a certain NFT that you purchased, then you get access to certain parts of the concert that otherwise you wouldn't. And then it's just like if I had a ticket to the Rolling Stones in 1962, right? Well, how do I authenticate that my ticket stub that now is a collectible for any Rolling Stones fan is actually the actual ticket stub? Well, with the NFTs, because they're recorded on blockchain, that's what that
You
is.
can. I
Yes.
love that. I want to learn more about NFTs, and I want to invite anybody who's in the NFT space and Web3 space. We need those voices heard at the Texas Blockchain Council. We need people working, because our session will be 2 years from now. Texas legislature meets
Again, so you got to get ready.
Yeah, we got to get ready, and we
Yes.
need to have these voices at the table to help us build this regulation.
Well, in our world, so in real estate and mortgages, where NFTs, I think they're not there yet, but because again, it's regulation, it's the state being okay recognizing these. But imagine a world where you build a house, okay, and you go in and say, I'm D.R. Horton and I'm building this property. And so on the blockchain, I've recorded who the contractor was, who the plumber was, what the costs were, everything that I did in the construction of that, how much I paid for the land, what the taxes were at that time. All of that stuff is recorded on the blockchain, okay? And then every single time the property is, and oh, by the way, that's an NFT, because this is what I've recorded to say that this ownership or title, because we have real life NFT now. They're called recorded titles. I mean, that's what you get when you go down to, and you want to take your spouse off the, the deed of your house or whatever. I mean, a deed is basically an NFT. That's what it is. It's just a physical NFT and not a digital NFT. And so, so now if every single time that house gets sold, okay, it gets recorded on the blockchain and that NFT gets transferred. Okay. Well, there could be a world where D.R. Horton gets paid. And that's where, when I say this, because I don't like the idea of it, but this is how things get adopted when there's profit involved. People say, oh, I want to do that. Right. So if the builder's like, wait a minute. So every single time I sell a house from here into perpetuity on one that I built, I can make $1,000. It's like, yeah, you could if you want to. But that NFT changes ownership, and that's your proof. Now, the downside in our industry, though, is that right now, we have mortgages, we have real estate agents, and we have title. Okay. Yes. So the ones that NFTs would affect would be title. And the reason for that is because part of title's job is they do two things. They're a third-party intermediary. So if I give money, I'm not giving it to a seller when I write earnest money. And when the bank transfer funds, I'm not sending it to the seller. We're sending it to the title company, and they distribute the money. So they're a third-party intermediary. Now, just imagine if there was a smart contract that took care of that, right? Then their other job is to research the title history of that property to make sure that someone doesn't come back and make claims to say, no, my grandmother's grandfather owned that land and they never consulted me, blah, blah, blah. Well, when you pay title insurance, when you buy a house, that's the whole point. The title insurance is to protect you if someone comes about and makes a claim to your property. Well, the state of Texas sets the title policy, the amount of the policy every year. So like title companies don't actually set the premiums. The state of Texas does. Okay. So you pay the same whether you use Old Republic title or Allegiance title or whoever. So now imagine a world where all of the transactions that have occurred, the entire chain of title is on the blockchain, and it takes half a second to verify as an individual, because I could go on the blockchain and check and see
precisely
who owned it, when, and all that kind of stuff. Well, I don't really need title insurance anymore, do I?
This would be a very disruptive technology, and
yes.
Not just to real estate.
No.
Have you heard California has their DMV is using blockchain for their driver's licenses and such?
Really?
So yes, like this is happening.
See, I think we should vote on the blockchain.
Goodness!
You want to get all the who cheated in voting and the machines and all this other stuff. I think there's a real easy solution to that.
Think about medical records.
Yes, everything.
Yes,
and I think that is the part where the reason I get frustrated by the cryptocurrency part of it is because that clouds the whole thing. You know what I mean? Because there's so much money involved, and people lose money and people get cheated and all this other stuff that happens because of all the trading of the cryptocurrencies. People lose sight of what the underlying technology is, which is the blockchain, and what that's starting to do. I don't know if you've heard this. So I read this somewhere. I don't know if this is true, but who knows? So in the Midwest, there are independent farmers that are, they've created it's basically like an insurance blockchain co-op where these aren't big farms. These are small farms where they put money every month. They pay a premium into a smart contract. Okay. And they have built within the smart contract to measure precipitation, rainfall levels, drought, big storms. Like they have all this data that gets input into this smart contract. And so they know obviously where your farm is. They know what kind of crops you produce. They know how much you spend on corn and all this other stuff. It's all recorded. And instead of State Farm or farmers being the insurance company, okay, all of these farmers co-op into the blockchain. And so if something happens that's catastrophic on your property because of bad weather, because of drought, or some sort of infestation of disease or whatever that kills your crops, well, that data gets put into the smart contract, and then that person gets paid out the premiums. So they don't need an insurance company. Wow. So it's like the whole concept of the blockchain and what it does is that it takes the need of a third party intermediary and it essentially eliminates it.
Yes, it does.
Once you scale it out. Now, I mean, we're going to take a long time to get there. It's not going to happen overnight. That's why we need guys like you, and groups like you guys out there pushing. But that's the thing that gets me so excited about it. Now, it scares the hell out of me as a mortgage lender. Because like I am the third party here, but I do think that the technology itself has so many applications that get lost in the shuffle of all of the cryptocurrencies and crypto bros that it saddens me, because if more people understood what it is and what it does, I think that the adoption level would happen much quicker.
Yes, we have a committee within the Texas Blockchain Council called Enterprise Blockchain Special Interest Group.
Okay.
And they just published 2 white papers about the implications of distributed ledger technology. Those are on our website on the policy page. I'll shoot them over to you. I think you would really appreciate it. But, and one other thing I want to talk about is supply chain. Supply chain and...
Oh, yeah.
Imagine we as consumers, we want to know
where our stuff came
from.
Yeah.
Right. And we can track that from its origin to the store where we're buying it.
Were my eggs really farm fresh eggs?
Exactly.
Yes.
Were they really open pasture? What do they call it? Open range? Free range.
Free range. Yes. I have free range chickens, by the way.
Oh, you do?
I do.
That's my colleague, Steve. That's hilarious.
Yes. I started with 11 chickens and now I'm down to 2 because, nature happens. Different predators and whatnot. But yes, they're actually surprisingly easy to deal with. Chickens aren't bad, but that's a whole other thing. So why, when someone would ask you, I don't want to invest in crypto because it's so volatile, I don't want to lose all my money. What would your suggestion to be to them to start learning about how all this stuff works? Like, how would you recommend someone go about just to get started to figure out, okay, well, I want to learn about this. So how do I do that?
I would say, look at the blockchain companies like Polygon, Polkadot. You don't have to invest in the token per se, but you could invest in the company or just research. We don't advise anybody to invest. Like that's just.
So when you say invest in the company, are they traded on like the stock exchange?
Exactly.
Are they really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
So you could just kind of get a feel, watch them, see how they're tracking. Doing your due diligence, reading, doing the research. There's, like you said, so much on YouTube.
That's how honestly, like I learned everything that I know from YouTube, and I've followed different people on different social media platforms that specialize in crypto stuff. And I won't name any of them in particular because some of them I was like, oh, this guy's great, and I love all this stuff. And then you kind of learn a little bit more about them, and you're like, it's just, listen, no matter what space you're in, whether it be finance or you be in crypto or you're in, auto trading or whatever it is, there's always going to be bad people that have bad intentions that are going to try to screw people over. Like that doesn't change.
Unfortunately not.
Right.
Yes.
That's just the nature of human beings. Like, and it doesn't get better depending on what industry you're in. Now, unfortunately, because crypto is unregulated as it currently stands, and there's so much money in there, because I think that's the thing too that maybe people don't realize is how much money is actually into this area. So I want to show. So you've given me some slides here.
Oh yes, this is an interesting poll that we outsourced. But what was really interesting was how many people claim to own cryptocurrency in the state of Texas.
Okay.
It's significantly higher than the national average, which is around, I think 15%.
Is this, tell me when I get to the
okay,
one.
right here.
Okay.
So this is the, no, go one more, sorry.
One more.
This is the age, race breakdown of who owns what. So the data shows that the younger you are, the greater the probability is that you own Bitcoin.
So you're saying the olds, they don't like the Bitcoin,
They
huh?
they don't like it. And that's what we're running up against too at the legislation.
Because they're all old.
Yeah. Well, the House is young.
Oh, really?
They're younger. Okay. They're more about the innovative
Nothing against old people,
ideas.
by the way. I mean, I'm basically old
we
too.
Can't throw
all right.
We can't throw stones.
I don't mean to say if anything's bad if you're old.
But the Senate errs on the elder side of things.
Yes.
And so
so a little more pushback there.
Precisely.
Yes.
A bit more.
Okay. So, and then you can see, well, I mean, this is favorable versus unfavorable, but I mean, it seems, I mean, this is all in Texas specifically.
This is Texas only.
I mean, the only ones that have like an unfavorable view of cryptocurrencies are just based on age. It has actually, when you look at demographics of, white, African-American, Hispanic, they're all, that's odd. So the white people are 50-50.
Isn't that funny?
And you know what? I feel like when you go back and look at, I don't want to get off on this, but just the vaccine, when the hesitancy occurred for that, it was mostly in minorities groups that were hesitant on taking the vaccine. But that's because they don't trust, they don't trust the government, basically. Right. So I guess I'm not surprised at all that Hispanic and African-Americans are way more, favorable of something like this because it doesn't involve the federal government.
That's a really good way to look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. All right. And then this is, this goes down to the area,
they live. Keep going. I think it's
which are all favorable to this
reasons for owning
right
Bitcoin, which I think of that. See that third one from the bottom, support blockchain. It's a lot of what you've been talking about today.
Okay. That's so they're into Bitcoin because they support the use of the blockchain.
Right.
Okay. And then it's pretty Democrat, Independent, Republican. They're all, there's not any big skews there. It all kind of looks the same. These are your proposals, crypto owners. Here we go.
Do you now, or have you ever owned any type of cryptocurrency like Bitcoin? 29% of Texans said yes.
Wow.
69% said no.
That's odd. So people support it and they think it's a good thing, but they don't own any. Interesting. Okay. Well, that's just kind of the way it is, I suppose.
And look at the difference between Republican and Independent, that pretty much right down the middle.
Yeah. It's not even the Democrat side's not that big of a difference either. Have you ever owned any crypto?
A lot of Bitcoin folks I find are lean more libertarian.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because they don't want the government involved in any of their stuff. Yeah, absolutely. Unfortunately, I kind of start pushing more in that direction myself these days. How likely are you to purchase Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies? Now, this was in 2022, so it's a little bit older. Yes. But man, that's a lot of people that were planning on getting it.
And that's surprising.
It's like 86% of the people polled over 12 said it was unlikely that even though they don't own it right now, they could see themselves being likely to purchase it in the near future.
Very likely.
Wow.
Yeah. We need to do a follow-up poll.
Yeah, no doubt. Here's Bitcoin awareness in Texas. They're kind of neutral. So why do you think Texas is driving, what makes Texas unique about being willing to kind of push these initiatives and make it more on the forefront of what we're trying to do compared to other states?
I think it's, first of all, the deregulated energy market.
Okay.
That appealed to a lot of the Bitcoin miners that were having to relocate out of China in 2021 when they banned it.
Yep.
The second thing is the policy. We're pretty lenient in that domain. Like there wasn't any, it was kind of Wild West. Nobody really saw it coming, but
sure, we
have a lenient policy. And there's a third reason. What would it be? There's three main reasons.
Well, I feel like it's probably just because, it's funny whenever people think of Texas, they think we're all country backwards, whatever. But there's somebody said one time, is like, you don't understand how much we need Texans, because if shit were to ever hit the fan, we need those crazy fools down there. Right. We're the ones with all the guns, right? So you got to remember that there's a maverick sense of existence that happens in Texas. And we don't necessarily want to be like everybody else. We like to be different. We want to kind of blaze our own path, and we are our own country for a period of time, so some of that stuff is in our DNA a little bit. And I really think that, just the desire to not go along with the status quo. And I also think we're unique in that we're a red state, right? with maybe we're more purple these days, but either way, but we have very big pockets of blue, right? Austin is incredibly blue, right? And I don't think either one's good or bad, but what I do think is you need a balance, right? You got to have the ability for one to play off the other, because the biggest problem I think that we have these days in some respects is that the two sides aren't willing to talk, because everybody's standing hard and firm on this thing and they're standing hard on this firm. And the whole thing about our country has always been discourse. When you have a discourse between two parties that disagree, more often than not, you're going to come to a solution that's beneficial for both. And I've heard it said before, which I agree with, is, when both parties walk away from the table unsatisfied, then you got a good resolution, right?
Absolutely.
Because they didn't get everything they wanted and we didn't get everything we wanted, but we were okay with meeting in the middle somewhere. And I think that we're a unique state, because when you look at Florida, I mean, I know a lot of people, but Florida's, I think it's about as red as it gets these days. I mean, I think DeSantis won his last election by like 70% or something. And California obviously is the far side of the spectrum on the blue end of things, where you got, people running into stores, holding up CVS's and shutting down Walmarts because they have so much theft and there's no police. So it's like chaos there. Not everywhere, of course. I'm sure, I'm just using a generalization, but for some reason, we've been able to kind of manage this middle ground a little bit, where, we want our freedom, but we're also willing to, let everybody else have their freedoms too. We're not trying to take anything away from anybody. Everybody gets to do what they want to do, basically. And I think that that's created an environment in Texas to where something like this, when you talk about Bitcoin and blockchain and this new innovative technology, which is going to be a big disruptor, once it permeates throughout society, I think you're going to see, the fact that Texas has been willing to be okay with not going with the grain, that it's going to put us in a position in 10 or 15 years where we're going to be way ahead of the curve over everybody else.
I think you're right.
Would you agree?
I would totally agree.
And it's all because of guys like y'all.
Oh, well, thank you for that compliment.
Yes.
It's hard work, but it's very rewarding.
Well, it takes, and I don't realize it until you start seeing stuff like what you guys do when you're down there at the state legislature, every time they're in session and you're lobbying and you're having these meetings, and, it's not like y'all are swimming in money, right? You're not doing this for the money, but does the blockchain council, do y'all mine Bitcoin yourself?
We do.
Okay,
yes,
perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so that's a way to kind of generate revenue for what y'all are doing.
That's true. And becoming a member is a way to support us.
Okay.
We have a PAC.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yes.
So yeah, that's a good thing. So tell anybody that that would listen, what if they wanted to become involved with the Blockchain Council, what are the different ways that they can support you guys and how can they get involved?
The best way would be to go to our website, texasblockchaincouncil.org, head to the join page. There's a waterfall that lays out, there's 5 tiers of membership, from collegiate to executive.
Okay.
You can scroll down, check out at the bottom of the page. That gets you access to our member meetings, our Slack committees.
Slack.
If you want to be,
Slack?
That's how our members communicate with one another.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah,
That's a
communication app.
Yes. I've heard of that actually. I've never used it before though. Why is that? That's become prevalent recently.
A lot of corporations are using it.
Yeah. Okay. Does that have anything to do with blockchain?
No.
Okay.
And that's what's funny. Like none of our office operations are on the blockchain.
Because it's not mainstream yet. I mean, it's a difficult thing to put together unless you have a lot of money behind it.
Yes. Although I've been meeting a lot of people that will come in and like help integrate this technology like into your office, into your daily doings.
Okay.
Kind of interesting.
That's awesome.
And then if you're just curious and you want to know more, come to one of our meetups, come to one of our networking events. That'll be found on our events page.
What do y'all do on those?
We'll do lunch and learns.
Okay.
You can even earn like a CLE or a CPE on certain events. Sometimes it's just pure networking where you just come meet up.
What's a CLE?
Certified legal education. It's like a education.
Sorry, my acronym game is a little loose these days. I don't have them all there.
Yeah, that would be the best ways to connect with us and get involved.
Well, awesome. Well, like I told you before, like this is, as you can probably tell, because I talk a lot on these things. This topic is just fascinating to me, and just being an outsider that doesn't, I'm not directly involved in any of it. I own I own Ethereum and I own some other coins, and I used to own quite a bit of Bitcoin, or not quite a bit, but a decent amount. And but I sold it because it was coming down. So, but that doesn't mean that when it gets to a place where I think it is going to be good to buy it again. This is more investment strategies than it is faith in technology, because I have immense faith in the technology on where it's headed and what it's going to be. But I'm also trying to make money. So, but I am a big believer in it. And I think that there needs to be more education in this space. I think there needs to be more discussion. And the fact that you guys are out there fighting the good fight and trying to get Texas on the forefront of all this, I think is amazing. And I really hope that, more and more people get involved and kind of become educated on how all this technology works, because I do think it's going to revolutionize how we do a lot of things. And I don't think people fully understand that just yet.
I totally agree. And we have got a lot of resources on our YouTube channel as well.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So they can go to the YouTube channel and they can get all kinds of information from there also.
That's correct.
Awesome. Yes. All right. Well, we're over an hour now, so I don't want to keep you too much time. I know you got new member orientations and all kinds of fun stuff you got to do. So, so thank you so much for coming in. Thank you for spending some time with me and going through all this stuff. I definitely want to have you back again in a few months, and we'll kind of see what's going on, what kind of new regulations are being passed. And now that everybody has at least some sort of cursory understanding of how all this stuff works, now we got to make sure that that the regulation is in place so it can be more mass adoption.
Thank you so much for having me, Mike. I look forward to coming back.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you anybody that stuck around, and we'll see you next time.